Okay, so yes, I'm Ross. I'm a PQS with BBD. Those of you that don't know what we do, basically we look after the money in any construction project. We are involved between FISO and final account stage, and we also have individuals who act as engineers to the contract, and we provide bank finance services for projects that are funded. So look, we were asked to discuss payment claims and the financial management of projects with regard to insolvency. Honestly, we're probably the guys that come in after the event and try and mop things up, keep things going and save a project. It's often very expensive, prolonged. We have difficulties with trying to get bonds, continuity of subs, and of course the hot topic of escalation in the market. But with regard to payment claims, I guess our angle would be how can we protect project cash flow? How can we help prevent insolvency? And how can we ensure contractors are paid in a timely manner and appropriately for the works that they've carried out? So it's good that there's a number of head contractors here because it's probably pitched more so at yourselves and what we need to do throughout that payment claim process. So look, a few of the things that we'll try and cover. The PQS role in the payment claim cycle. How to have a smooth payment claim process, really helping us to help you get paid. What security steps are in place and why. And how can we help protect that cash flow? Cash is king, as they say. Just to touch on, we typically work with the following contracts. NZS 3910, which would be the most common. That's obviously going through quite a rigorous review process, due to be rolled out by the end of the year. Big focus on that is the role of the engineer to the contract. There's things like target pricing coming in, the final account process and terminology around that is changing, and there is a focus on cost fluctuating contracts. 3916, typically the same but for design and build. 3915, again very similar in terms of a lot of the clauses. Obviously we don't have an engineer to the contract under 3915, and with that there's some differing payment claim processes and timings. NZIA we typically try and stay clear of because architects are crap at administering contracts. So look, what is our role within the payment claim cycle? Predominantly it's protecting the principal's commercial interests. That said, we are there to be fair and reasonable and make sure contractors are paid for the works that they've carried out. Within that monthly period, we're there to value the works complete. That would be the contract works or the trade summary elements completed in the month. Assess materials on or off site. Carry out assessments and payment of variations. With that can be contract instructions, provisional sums, and contractor raised variations that may not be covered at that point. We also at that stage obviously apply retentions as per the contract conditions. So what do we look for or what do we need to make sure that process goes smoothly? Well, most of this is covered in the contract and is backed by the Construction Contracts Act, but you probably all know this. It is your contract specifics, identifying the value of works completed in the month, the value of materials on site, and separately the value of materials off site, for which is often a Schedule 14 process. Also identify any variations as we've mentioned. What is important to note is that the timeline or the clock starts when that payment claim comes in. So ensuring that all of this is covered is prominent on actually making sure that that process can run smoothly and we can get you your cash when you need. There are different time scales depending on the contract. 3910, as we say, is what we normally use. Us as a PQS and engineer to contract typically has 7 days. Now, within that 7 days, we have to have an initial review of the claim, a site visit, we have to review all documentation. There's typically a back and forth between the main contractor. We then have to give a valuation to the engineer to the contract who will then release a payment schedule or provisional payment schedule. What's important again in that is that often main contractors use that the provisional payment schedule as a mechanism to further negotiate claims. It's not what it's there for. Really, the period after that is for any principal adjustments. And when you think about it, we have 17 days to really, from point of that claim coming into payment, to facilitate all of these actions. For a main contractor point of view, they're often trying to pay a subcontractor for the 20th of the month. And you probably will have all been involved in various discussions. Christmas time is always the argument of how that payment claim is dealt with. Often main contractors and subcontractors want paid up to the end of December, but of course we're all closing down, and they also still want to be paid for the 20th of that month. Statutory holidays can often put that beyond that. So there's always a bit of a discussion point and a few arguments over how we actually facilitate that process. The one key thing I would say, and it goes back to Mainzeal days, is that we will never forecast for works not complete at that point. With Mainzeal, there was a number of subcontractors not paid for works that were forecast throughout that December period, which then forecasted through and took us to that sort of February point in which they were placed in liquidation. So again, how do we streamline this process? For us, it's paramount that we get advance warning of variations. Sometimes we get a bulk drop of variations with the claim, and it's near impossible for us to actually assess those and give proper payment for those within that time period. It's where the payment on account sort of terminology comes in, which is not liked and comes under a lot of scrutiny. But we're also obligated under the contract to give a fair and reasonable valuation of that. So trying to get those variations early, get them agreed or put away is paramount for us to make sure that process goes smoothly. Again, making sure that all relevant information is provided. That might be backup, trade splits, breakdowns, that sort of thing. We also find that the first claim has certain prerequisites to make that payment go through, which could be bond, insurances in place, triple SPs, or CMPs. Again, for us, bonds and insurances are probably the most important things to make sure that security is there, so that any payments that are being made are backed. On and off-site materials claimed separately. I'll go into that a bit further later on, and the Schedule 14 process. And the last one, knowledge is power. I guess from a PQS point of view, our common gripe is that often the QS we're dealing with might not know what they're claiming for, where they're claiming for it, or what that work represents. And that just adds time to the process with them going back to a subcontractor. One example being, I have a contract just now where I would say the QS pretty much uses us to actually present the claim. They might claim 80% of something, and you sit there for a day going, I can't get that to get to 80%. I'm up at 50%, for them to come back and say, all right, I'll accept 60. So for us, we don't think that guy even visits the site. So it's really important that we get that knowledge and understanding of the works, and that claims are presented accurately. Again, some mechanisms to make sure that claim process can go smoothly. It might be a pre-agreed P&G cash flow where fixed and time-related components are separated out, and that P&G becomes a monthly known cost, and there's no real discussion or argument about it on a month-by-month basis. We could have a schedule or split of trades. You take that building that's shown in the background, that was the Pacifica Tower, which was 57 stories. And before we even started on construction, we scheduled out each trade on a level-by-level basis, first fix, second fix, that sort of thing. It was a lengthy process still each month, but it removed those arguments and the value of works that were being complete because everyone really knew where they were standing. Again, early warning of potential variations and notification of any delays and cost impacts. So the off-site materials, which is one that's a bit of a bugbear at the moment, and one that, again, I think some contractors are aware of their liabilities under that. Others think we're just being pedantic and asking for a lot of bits of signed paperwork. just to authorise a payment. But really, the whole process is to bring a subcontractor or supplier into the contract. And there's a number of documents that need to be in place to allow that to happen. The Schedule 14, we now have implemented the requirement for Schedule 14s to have the value on them. And that is so that we're aware that the subcontractor is aware of the value being claimed. There's one instance in the market just now where a subcontractor has gone into liquidation. The supplier has provided some materials. The subcontractor has claimed an amount, let's call it $1 million. That material is only worth 200K. Now, not only is the supplier not being paid the 200K, they certainly haven't been paid $1 million. So that main contractor has passed that through. It has been paid by a PQS, not within our company. And someone's going to come looking for $1 million worth of material, which doesn't exist. So to put that in place, we then know that at least the subcontractor and the suppliers are aware of how much value is attributed to that material. We also ask that the Schedule 14s are signed, and that needs to be by a director. It can't be the office cat or anyone else. And again, that keeps that liability and that responsibility for that material. The other thing is it's not a set and forget process. Often we have materials claimed and covered under a Schedule 14, and they're sitting there for 6 months. We really try and get our guys to go out and visit those materials every month. The main contractor should be doing the same, because a lot can happen in that 6 months' time. It can be an early warning sign when materials are claimed and it's for the wrong value or there's something funny going on with them. It's a way of cash flowing up front. We also make sure all the materials are insured, and again, there's sort of different processes with that, but again, principle has to be acknowledged on the insurance certificate. Insurance has to be correct. Again, from a timing point of view, you often find that insurance can expire, and so that we always try and put calendar reminders in to make sure that we have to check that. And the other thing is photographs and labelling of materials. Again, how often do you see a loose piece of A4 paper lying on a sheet or on steelwork or whatnot? You don't really know that that's for you, and you don't know that it might be going to someone else. Retentions. We've touched on quite a bit throughout the session. I won't go into it too much. What I would say is that the change in the retentions regime, we reckon we might see bonds coming in lieu of retentions, because from a main contractor, from a principal to a main contractor, that's probably manageable. From a main contractor to a number of subs, that paperwork and that cost of that additional overhead of tracking those retentions could be quite significant. So we think there might be a bit of a change coming in that as it becomes more difficult to track and administer retentions. The other security steps that we have in place or look for, contractor's bond, obviously. There's been some comments around the continuity of subs and how that money can perhaps be claimed, or if a subcontractor has not been paid from the main contractor, say. That's really where, whilst not intended, that's where that bond can come in. We also mentioned the security of a contractor, and whilst we don't see it often, that principal's bond can come in. I understand that often that's not an option, but it is something that can be picked up on and requested. Continuity guarantees, again, are key. We look for declarations from main contractors every month as part of the payment schedule process to confirm that subcontractors have been paid. And those continuity guarantees, again, provide comfort that should a main contractor, say, go into liquidation, that there's a mechanism there for that subcontractor to continue on with the work. There are complications with that, as we've discussed, there could be a lapse in payment there, and often we see the only way out of that is particular deals being done to make sure that project can continue on. So cash flow protection, I guess just some processes here. We acknowledge now that paid when paid is no longer acceptable.
we try and make sure payment claims are submitted to close to the end of the month as possible. That captures not only the work that's been carried out as accurately as possible, but it lets that process run in its proper cycle. Again, I've had over the years main contractors try to submit their claims on, say, the third week. Again, that's so they don't need to cash flow any payments to subcontractors with that sort of overlap between the 17 days and the 20th of the month. Make sure the claim is correct and complete. Again, it just cuts down time. For our point of view, we're actually looking for, on the best part of our reasons to pay you, not to deduct money off. So the more documentation and the more substantiation we can have, the cleaner and faster the process is. I've mentioned variations there. Again, communication is key. Let's stop the back and forth. If there's something awaited, let us know. We often find that it's day 6 and we're still chasing Schedule 14 has not been signed and things like that, which again just puts stress on everyone and stress on cash flow. Again, that's a bit more about retentions and how we see that changing. We've discussed most of it by way of reporting how retentions need to be held. We mentioned fines. The only thing we didn't mention was the magnitude of that, which could be 200,000 for a company and the 50,000 for the directors, as mentioned. And that's really it. So look, that was a bit of a brief oversight, but really it's what we're looking for as a PQS to try and, I guess, help the process, limit insolvency, and make sure you guys get cash when you need it.